Hi, I'm Nick Ross for ITWire. Today I'm with IFS. Who are you and what is your role?
Hey Nick, good to meet you. My name is Warren Zietsman. I'm the Managing Director of IFS in Australia. I've been with IFS now coming up 5.5 years looking forward to our interview.
How did IFS first come about and why would companies want to work with you?
So IFS came about more than 40 years ago out in Sweden. It started off with a couple of university students actually setting up a business looking to provide an asset maintenance system for a nuclear power plant. And I think that's one of the things that makes IFS so unique is that we were born in industry. We didn't come in from a financial perspective or a core ERP perspective and then try and branch out. We started off in very much in some of the core industries we still focus on maintaining today. And I think that's what makes us really unique compared to some of the other players in the market at the moment.
And how did you come to work for IFS?
So I was introduced to IFS, as I said, just over 5 years ago. It was an opportunity in Australia where they were looking for somebody to take it to its next level of growth. I think the previous incumbent management had taken it to a great point, done a lot of good grounding. We had established a lot of good logos. And I think there was a view that they were looking for somebody now to take it to that next level and grow the business and expand in some of our core markets.
So you're well placed to discuss manufacturing industry. What would you say is the current state of Australian manufacturing?
So look, manufacturing is very close to my heart. I grew up around manufacturing and processing plants in South Africa through family businesses and that, so it is something that's very close to my heart. I think, look, Australian manufacturing is an interesting place. It comes from its heyday in the 1960s where it accounted for 30% of the economy. You know, it was a real little powerhouse. And I think over time it's dropped down. It's come under labour pressures in terms of labour costs, and I think ageing technology is a challenge. I think process manufacturing is very difficult because it's very competitive. It becomes where in the world can you do it cheaper? I think when you start looking at engineered to order or you start looking at discrete manufacturing, I think that's where I think there's a real play for Australia at the moment. So sort of that high-tech, high-end manufacturing. And I don't just think locally, I think globally. Today the Australian manufacturing industry is quite fragmented. It's interesting that almost 90% of the companies in Australia employ less than 20 people in manufacturing that are in manufacturing. So it's very concentrated on a couple of big manufacturers. I think the other thing that's interesting to note is that only 15% of Australian manufacturers turn over more than $2 million in turnover a year, which is astounding when you look at it, right? But yet it still accounts for 6.8% of employment in Australia. So it still commands a place in Australia. And it employs a couple of million people every year. So it does have a place. What's more interesting for me is the opportunity coming around Australian manufacturing. So at the moment, according to the Australian Senate report, Australia manufacturing is what they would classify as 72% self-sufficient, right? Which means there's a 28% gap for manufacturing to come into Australia to become self-sufficient. That's the first point really worth noting. I think the second point that's really worth noting is that if they had to increase tariffs on trade imports on manufactured goods from other countries, it would actually reduce the GDP, right, ironically. So, there's a view here by 1.8%. So there is a view here that actually it's not a good thing to just try and tax imports. It's actually a view to try and manufacture more. The other fact that really stands out for me in the marketplace is that Australia can adapt. If you look at what happened in COVID, supply chains were crippled, we had real challenges. Australian manufacturing increased by 14% between the end of 2020 and the end of 2021. Now that to me shows me that there's an opportunity to either nearshore or onshore a lot of manufactured goods here in Australia. I think what's going to become critical is how do they manufacture in such a way where they have a USP, they have something that's unique that the market wants, and more importantly, how do they maintain competitiveness? How do they be competitive? And I think that's where IFS can really come into its fold. It can really help companies actually become competitive, maintain its competitiveness. And maybe a lot.
I guess I should on that one first. How can IFS actually help with manufacturing?
So IFS fundamentally is a producer and designer of enterprise software. We focus on industries that manufacture and distribute goods, on industries that build and maintain assets, and industries that service assets. So we focus on anything project intensive, asset intensive, and service intensive. IFS specifically in manufacturing, it sort of focuses on edge to cloud architecture, which allows for zero latency in performance management of production processes. And this is really important. Having zero latency in your manufacturing process allows you to process and use real-time data. It allows you to make decisions real-time. It allows you to adapt and be agile in your industry, right? And that's quite a key thing. I think the other thing IFS does is it helps companies adopt a cloud-first strategy, which is very important when trying to build a digital IT platform, especially one that's scalable. I think without that sort of coaching and understanding and the right technology, it's very difficult to get to that place. And that's what impedes very often things such as your productivity, things such as profitability, and ultimately revenue growth. So IFS is very well positioned as a business globally. In fact, if I had to talk to it, we currently have just over 10,700 customers globally. I'd say more than 35% of those are in the manufacturing sector specifically. So right through from automotive to food and beverage to discrete, or call it engineer to order, right through to process manufacturing. So we cater for a very, very large portion of manufacturing customers around the globe. And here in Australia too, we have quite a strong footprint of Australian customers in manufacturing.
Okay, I cut you off before because I thought we should get that in, but you had one more point to make.
I think the other point that's becoming really interesting globally, and it's really coming down to Australia as well, is the whole concept around ESG management and goals in ESG, and how do manufacturers, so there are a couple of things. There's the concept of how do manufacturers hone in on the ESG goals and aspirations and what the public wants them to deliver. I think there's that, how do we become industry 4 compliant, even sometimes industry 5 in manufacturing to a degree now. And I think the other thing is, how do we become part of a circular economy? I think those are the 3 big things that are on manufacturers' boardrooms tables at the moment. And I think IFS is very well placed to actually help with those things. You asked, how can IFS help manufacturers? Well, a classic example, if you think of things like carbon footprint, ESG goals, sustainability, it's such a big topic globally now. It impacts the people that want to work for manufacturers, and it impacts the people that buy from manufacturers. So manufacturers have to wake up to this. They don't have an option on this, right? Coupled with the things such as productivity, efficiency, real-time data, those sorts of things. To become industry 4, sort of industry 4 recognized, and to be at that point where you run smart factories, all right, you need to be at a point where you can manage your data real time, where you can understand your carbon footprint at the outset of loading your assets in, managing your assets, running your machines. And IFS can actually do that now. The software embeds the ability to measure and sustain and drive ESG goals. Not only does that do, the software actually allows you to measure carbon footprint at the point of asset entry and asset initiation. So, there's a lot of new or next-gen technology going into IFS, specifically focused around the manufacturing sector.
So you may partially answer my next question, but it's how is IFS's involvement in manufacturing going to kind of change in the near and not so near future?
So look, as a business, IFS is definitely focused on what we call next-generation ERP development, or next-generation enterprise development, right? And to that, we're trying to hone in everything from machine learning to augmented reality to predictive maintenance, to real-time data management, utilization, ESG, sustainability, achievement. So IFS is very focused on trying to deliver something, or deliver software, should I rather say, that allows a manufacturer to actually service its customers and deliver a moment of service. I think that's one of our key sort of core embedded threads throughout everything we do in IFS. So coming back to the manufacturing in Australia specifically, I think with ESG being such a hot topic at the moment, the software will actually allow companies to input what their ESG goals and aspirations would be, measure that, and then provide visibility to the public through actual real-time quantitative stats on how they're actually performing against those. So that's a big focus for IFS. I think the other thing that IFS can help manufacturing in Australia is around understanding the process flows through horizontal integration, through vertical integration, and ensuring that they've got real-time decision making or real-time data decision making at every point of the production process. I think that is really key, and it's the use of our lobbies and the enablement of lobbies to manage that data at different parts of the production process that make us so unique in what we do.
And with all that in mind, would you say Australian manufacturing has a strong future?
Depends on who you talk to on which given day. I'm quite positive and optimistic about that. I mean, we've invested here in our manufacturing vertical here in Australia, all right? I think, again, I come back to it. There's a 28% potential opportunity in self-sufficiency in manufacturing, so there's definitely physical numbers on the table that say there is scope to increase manufacturing here. I think the second thing, we've shown that just by increasing tariffs, it does nothing for anybody, so it's not really going to help people at the end of the day. And I think the third thing is that Australia is a country that's really rich in talent, in human capital, all right? And I think if one can take that human capital and start to look at the gaps globally, I think Australia can re-enter that manufacturing heyday. It's going to take time. It's never going to happen overnight. I think the other thing that gives me optimism around that is the government has realised from a, let's call it a national perspective, that they can't rely on foreign supply chains as much as they used to, because COVID has shown us that that can cause a crisis. So in a time of conflict, in a time of sort of a sort of medical pandemic, I think the government's realised that actually we need to be a bit more self-sufficient in some areas, and I think there's a lot of incentives starting to be created around manufacturing and really providing this sort of cultivating environment for manufacturers to get back into the fold.
And which regions around the world does IFS work with, and how does Australia compare?
So IFS has got four regions globally, all right. We fit part of the APJ MEA region, so we're one of the four regions out here. But we're part of a region where we cover in Australia, Japan, we're out in Sri Lanka, we're out in the Middle East, we're out in Singapore, and we're out in South Africa, and that makes up one region. But then we've got the Americas, we've got the Europeans, and then we've got the Nordics, and there are other areas. So we've got four core regions within our business, and largely they service 6 core verticals. So globally we focus on engineering, construction and infrastructure, we focus on energy, utilities and resources, we focus on manufacturing, we focus on telco, we focus on service management, and then on aerospace and defence. And I think what you can see by that grouping is that we only focus on those 6 areas, and they're very service management intensive, project intensive and asset intensive. And I think what makes us unique is our deep-rooted domain expertise in these areas, and manufacturing being one of them. We've done it from day dot, and we've only stuck in that. We haven't tried to be all things to all people and said we have one size fits all. We've really focused on those 6 core verticals and within those industries, both globally and here in Australia.
And how can companies work with IFS? Do you do direct sales or go through the channel, or what?
We do both. So it's a very good question. We have quite an interesting ecosystem here in Australia. We have an ecosystem of what we call global system integrators or regional system integrators, and those are the large system integrators. Go through the big accounting practices, consultancies, and we won't go into names, but yes, the big practices. And then we have an entire ecosystem of channel partners where we've got them dotted around the country. So depending on your organisation, the size of your organisation, and the complexity behind your organisation, and the requirements, we have a channel partner that you absolutely can work through. But by the same token, IFS does work directly. Some customers want to work directly with IFS-based SMEs here in Australia, and to that end, we have offices in Perth, we have offices in Melbourne, head office based in Sydney, and we've got a satellite office based in Brisbane. So we've got a decent spread across the country with regards to IFS.
And is there anything else you'd like to add while we've got the iTWire audience here?
Look, I think if you want more information around IFS, it's probably go to our website, or alternatively, give us a call directly here in our Australian office. We'd gladly come and have a chat with you. I think it's a topic that excites me, because I've seen through our customer base here in Australia, we would deal with what I call high-end manufacturers. I see them not being able to keep up with some of the demand globally for the Australian product. So that tells me, 1, we've got the skills, 2, we've got the ability to sell internationally, not just here in Australia, and 3, the globe wants our product. So I'm not saying it's heyday, but it's definitely, there is scope to grow. And I think if people are prepared to invest in this industry, and I think actually put the right technology in, I think that's critical. And I'll say that irrespective of where your thinking's at, if you're not running in the right technology off the right platforms, I think you don't stand a chance. But I think with the right guidance from the right software vendor, and IFS is very well positioned for this with the right technology, I think you'll be in a very good position to actually provide something competitive on a global scale.
Thank you very much, Warren.
Thank you very much. Great to be with you.